Commissioner.
All right, and we'll go ahead and let you take care of this. Jeff?
Okay. If we could just start by, for the record, introducing everybody here, and then I'll go into the rest of the spiel as we go. But Commissioner Jeff Huff, Bannock County.
Commissioner Ernie Moser, Bannock County.
Commissioner John Crowder, Bannock County.
Adam McKinney, Bannock County 911 Communications Director.
Marlon Miller, Chubby Fire Department.
Jordan Van Every, Pocatello Fire Department, Union President.
Ron Ahern, Pocatello Fire Department and Bannock County Ambulance District Chief.
Brian Blad, Mayor of the City of Pocatello.
Brandon Clayson, Chief of Staff, Bannock County.
Christy Clauser, Comptroller, Bannock County. Deputy Clerk Nancy Allen.
Okay. A couple ground rules. Since this is kind of the first time that this whole group has been together, I wanted to make sure, number one, for Mayor Blad's sake, that we did not talk anything money today. This is not a discussion about pay. This is not a discussion about anything other than a high level, where do we take EMS in Bannock County? And I've had several discussions with Jordan and some of the union people, and I want to make sure that that was clear up front. And so I want to make sure they also had a seat at the table, since what we're talking about today will impact them and also impact their negotiations in the future with the City of Pocatello. So again, no discussion of finances or anything like that is allowed today to honor your group or your commitment with your employees. So today is just that high level discussion.
Okay, before we go on, Commissioner, Chairman and Commissioner, was Mayor England supposed to be at this meeting as well?
He was not invited
Oh, he was
because
not. Okay.
we're dealing primarily with your people.
Okay.
And so while it will impact Chubbuck, that's why we've got Merlin here to talk about that.
Perfect, that's okay.
Go from there.
Yeah.
And so again, just by way of history, this discussion started probably about a year ago. We had Chief O'Hearn, actually started with Mayor England asking about getting an ambulance in Chubbuck. And so we began looking at that. Chief O'Hearn came in and assembled some statistics. We brought a group together to review those statistics and see about putting an ambulance in Chubbuck, and it turned up that through that discussion, the real need ended up being servicing South County. And so that began a whole nother chain of events to look at that, and as a result of that, Bannock County decided to partner with the City of McCammon to put an ambulance bay down in McCammon to serve as a regional hub to help serve that south end of the county, with the goal at that time to staff it full-time 24/7 with whatever level of service was deemed appropriate, whether that was just basic medical care or more of an advanced life support care. And so as Chief O'Hearn and I have met several times over the last few months, we've kind of batted around some ideas of what this might look like, talked with the union. They've got some ideas of how to move things around to help facilitate staffing that and serving the communities here locally better. And so that brings us to today, which is the group coming together to just talk about what it looks like in the future. Because one of the statistics that we learned during that initial meeting was the response time in Pocatello and Chubbuck is 3 to 8 minutes to have an ambulance on site from time of call. The response time in South County starts at about 20 minutes, plus or minus a little bit. And then that was exacerbated this summer, and hopefully Chief O'Hearn might have some updated numbers for me, because I see the burrowing of the frows over there, or the furrowing of the brows over there.
I've got the numbers.
But this summer, Lava ambulance was offline for approximately 6 days or more because they didn't have volunteers to staff it. And in some of our community meetings that we've had with Downey specifically, they mentioned issues with volunteers being able to staff their ambulance and so on and so forth. And the other issue that came up from the statistics, and Chief O'Hearn and I have talked about this a couple times, is the transport rate. The transport rate in Pocatello is an acceptable number, 65%, maybe it's a little more than that.
Right around 60, I believe.
60.
Service-wide.
Okay.
41% no transport rate.
And then the South County transport rate was in that 40% range, correct?
I did pull up the data that I brought last time. I haven't run it currently, so I'm not sure what the current no transport rate for South County is and whether it's much different from what we do in just district-wide, but we certainly can try to parse those out.
Okay. Well, my concern was if we're having a higher no transport rate in South County, that's a drain on the system here in Pocatello, because we take an ambulance out of here, basically take it offline for a couple of hours, and there's no reimbursement for that, and we're not using our resources adequately. So that was another reason for looking at putting that ambulance down in McCammon to help relieve some of the stress on the Pocatello-Chubbuck system. So,
One of the big challenges in our community meetings is, like you said, personnel. And though finding people to volunteer is getting tougher and tougher. One lady that always in Lavish, she says, well, I work 3 jobs, so I can't volunteer for anything else. But it's those that were committed and older that have been in the system for a while, and then they were starting to retire or had enough, and nobody's replaced them. So arranging something so that we have a staffed system down on that end of the county is getting more and more vital.
and as a part of this discussion, I'm doing some preliminary looking and I've had some preliminary discussions about consolidating all of the fire districts in Bannock County into one. And so that would factor into this discussion a little bit further down the road, but just so you know that that has been a discussion. And the fire districts have agreed to at least look at that proposal when we get it put together. So there is no commitment to do that, but there is a commitment to at least look at a proposal to see if that functions. And so part of my thought process is if they're able to consolidate those, then we look at creating a separate ambulance district to help fund that full-time staffing down there in South County as opposed to whatever. So again, a lot of logistics there that need to still be worked out to even create the plan, but that is kind of one of the things I'm looking at this year is consolidating to see if we can fund South County a little bit better that way. So with that, I would like to maybe open it up to Chief or Jordan to talk about what they see as the future for EMS in Bannock County. Probably start with you, Ryan, and kind of given the discussions you and I have had, and I know you've had some thoughts about this, where do you see it going? Or
Well, really what we're looking at is we're continuing, I have them here, we're seeing just generally an increase in call volume. You know, 2022 was our largest year on record. We did just over 9,000 calls in our service, and about, you know, roughly 8,400 of those calls were EMS related. And so when you look at the call volumes, and we basically have kind of two systems. If I just focus on the Bannock, the ambulance district, we kind of have the volunteer system, the rural system in South County that we run with 3 staffed volunteer ambulances. Down there, the issue that we deal with is longer response times. Not only, you know, a little bit because these volunteers are not stationed at a station; they're coming from home to a station, getting in an ambulance and responding to the scene. They do a great job of what we've asked them to do, which is stand by and serve their communities when those emergencies arise. The call volume down there, the number of calls is less. It's about 600 a year, versus when you look up at kind of the full-time, the population centers, which is the city of Pocatello and Chubbuck, we do a lot more calls there. Only about 7% of our call volume for EMS is in that South County area, versus, you know, the remaining 93% is in the Pocatello city limits and the North County zones. And I try to be really careful when we're talking about these because these are all county assets. They're not Pocatello ambulances or South County ambulances. You know, they're all ambulance district assets. They just happen to be staffed where we've historically had the facilities, the Pocatello Fire Department stations, and the population that drove the call volume and the demand for service. So in South County, we deal with the length of time it gets to get a paramedic to somebody that's having a heart attack down there, even though we have basic EMTs that may be there on scene. We're looking at that ALS intercept. In North County, the problem that we're dealing with more and more is just the sheer volume and the fact that we're having multiple calls happen during the same time period. Yesterday, for example, there were 2 times during the day when we had exhausted all the resources, city fire apparatus and county EMS apparatus, 2 different times yesterday, just due to sheer call volume. So in North County, we're dealing with the sheer numbers. And so there you look at, well, do we need another unit, either peak time staffing or 24/7 to help pick up some of that to ensure that we have units in service to answer the call for those emergencies. And so those are kind of the two different ways to look at the problem. One is a distance and time problem, and the other one is a number of calls and volume problem. Anything on that, or?
I think, from Ryan kind of talked about how just yesterday, we had a few calls that we were unable to put units on. And, from a labor standpoint, we want to do what's right by the community, and we want to help everybody all the time, right? So sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating for us to not be able to do that sometimes. And so that's why I'm here. That's what I want to see is I want us as a labor group to be able to provide this service to everybody in the most efficient and effective manner. So that's what I'm hoping to kind of glean by bringing everybody together here, is to start that discussion and start that process so that we can come up with a solution together and still abide by the confines of the budget and make sure that we're doing things correctly. So I just hope to be a little more involved than we previously have been so that we can reach a solution together.
Merlin, do you have any
I don't.
thoughts on anything? Okay.
I will tell you, in addition to the call volume increase, there is a number of overlapping calls that anywhere from our department that we, anywhere from 15 to 21% of the calls are overlapping. So it's not going to get better.
So in Chubbuck, are most of your calls the same way, the medical?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, about 85% of our overall service call volume is EMS. And, one of the things that the city and the county have always done really well with this contract is kind of shared resources. So when we have a fire in the city, we have an ambulance on scene at that fire that's helping and also being there as EMS support in case we have somebody, civilian or fire personnel, that's injured. The flip side of that is that when there's large EMS demand, fire units will cross-staff onto reserve ambulances to help field those extra calls in addition to the 3 frontline ambulances. Well, now we're seeing about 200 times last year that happened. It's up about 27% over the last 5 years that fire units are staffing EMS calls, which is great for the community. It does tie those units up, and so we have a little bit of a reduced fire response capacity. And so I think it's fair to talk about kind of the balance in the system and how we've always worked together. But as call volume increases and that overlap, as Chief Miller mentioned, increases, there's more demand on fire units to staff EMS units to serve the community.
So from just a purely budgetary standpoint, would it be cheaper to send an ambulance and not use a fire truck or a fire engine on a call that's, like Merlin says, the majority of their calls are EMS related? So just a high-level budget question, is it cheaper to send just the ambulance versus the fire truck?
It is, certainly, and it's only gotten worse over the last few years with the price increases we've seen on apparatus. So now you're looking at almost $1 million for a fire truck, and to have it running 85% of the calls chasing an ambulance down the road is a capitally intensive process because you're putting wear and tear on that vehicle. The flip side, though, the problem is that some of these high acuity calls like chest pains, strokes, difficulty breathing, cardiac arrests, overdoses, they require more than just 2 people on the ambulance to really effectively treat and move that patient and get them to definitive care. And so the fire service has always kind of been the add-on to the EMS component to help get staffing there to assist with additional treatment. Doing CPR requires at least 5 people to really be effective at it. And we try to put about 7 or 8 people on a scene to do that, so that we're rotating out compressors, and you see that our cardiac arrest survival rates are higher than the national average. So we're successful in that program, but it is personnel intensive. And so I guess the question becomes, how do we get the people still to those high acuity calls?
Well, the follow-up question I have to that is, have you seen a decrease in your fire calls over the last 5 years so that the majority of stuff really is, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, but the majority of stuff is that. So the greatest need from a resource standpoint is more EMS related than fire related. Is that fair to say?
I think it's remained fairly stable, and just, it's very random. I mean, we've had 3 fires just within the last handful of days. And so overall, it seems like, as we've talked about, the mix of fire versus EMS and about 85% of our call volume being EMS, that seems, in my recollection, to have been fairly stable. And that as we see call volumes rise, they seem to be rising proportionately to that mix of service.
Seems like in our area, though, we haven't had as many structure fires, but we've had a lot of brush fires outside or along the interstate or in different areas in looking at things.
Well, Chairman, and Commissioners, I think that when we think fire and firefighters, we think structure fires. Our firefighters are responding to a lot of fires. They prevent the structure from being caught on fire because they get there in time to do that. And so you don't see 15% structure fires and 85% EMS, but there are a lot of fires that I think both departments go to. Both chiefs and Jordan could correct me if I'm wrong. There are a lot of fires out there that nobody knows that there's a fire because they were able to respond and get it put out in a timely fashion, that it hasn't engulfed the structure. Am I wrong? I mean, we get a lot of dumpster fires and different things like that we get called out on too.
I think as far as the city fire department goes, and Chubbuck as well, we have a really good response to those what we call incipient stage fires. So there's a lot of times when we're able to get on scene, quick, get inside, and extinguish the fire before it turns into something that makes the news. And so is that data quantifiable? I don't quite know. It's still recorded as a call, but it just may not be something that makes it onto the 6 p.m. or the 10 p.m., right? Because we are able to have that fast response time, and our guys are, take a lot of pride in making sure we're trained both in fire and EMS to make sure that we provide that professional level of care and that we take care of the community.
Well, and I might add, with the EMS, the reason we have the fire trucks going is because people are getting larger. And 3 or 4 or 5 guys sometimes cannot pick up that person that's now 4 or 5 or 600 pounds that we are often going to back and forth. And I don't know if there's a delicate way to say that on the record, but the reality is we have to have more manpower for no other reason than lifting people out and getting them to the ambulance.
And we dealt with that in Lava. I mean,
Absolutely.
one was down there last week, and there's 2 ladies on the crew. So what they do, they called Bannock County Sheriffs, and 2 sheriff's deputies come and assisted. The same thing in Downey, the lady talking about people, and she's at church, she's in her dress, and she jumps in the ambulance and heads out on the interstate. She's out there in 3 foot of snow drifts, helping haul a guy to the ambulance.
Yeah.
We also have to think about the employees. One back injury, it's not fair for the employee because management can't get enough personnel to take care of the problem. And I don't think we should ever shove that on the employee side, but it's a management problem to make sure we have the resources to do the job. So I've always looked at it that it's my job to make sure we have enough people there to take care of the city.
And that's a lot easier to do in Chubbuck and in
Yes.
Pocatello than it is
Correct.
in South Bannock County. I'm just plain and simple.
And I think that both departments do a very good job at doing that and protecting employees and getting enough resources there in town. It's out of town, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And as Chubbuck grows and as the city of Pocatello grows, I think it's gonna become more difficult to get those resources into North County as well. And so I think that the right steps are being taken to go to South County because of a timing issue right now, but I think it's just within a year or two, we're gonna need probably to look at what happens north of, in Chubbuck and stuff. I think I think this is a good idea to have a meeting right now and start these meetings, because I think that we're gonna find that we need more than what's available.
And that's a good segue into the next thing about what we look for in the future, because as we've had these discussions, it's always been, how can we relieve the pressure in Pocatello and Chubbuck, assuming that within the next 5 years, we're gonna have a substantial different asset base in the metropolitan area to satisfy the demand. And as the South County grows, we need some assets down there. So that's why, if you want to talk to that just a little bit, kind of the discussions that Chief O'Hearn and I have had is maybe right now we don't need a 24/7 down in McCammon, but within maybe the next 5 years we will. So, okay, how do we get from where we're at today to satisfy that, in addition to creating that resource for the north end, the Chubbuck area, to balance what you just talked about? So, Chief, you have any?
Well, I think, we have to look at all options, everything from, obviously when we talk about EMS, the first thing that comes to people's minds is an ambulance. And so when you say we want to expand EMS capabilities in South County and McCammon, for instance, with this station investment, I think people have in their mind an ambulance there 24/7. And certainly that might be ideal, and that might be the 5-year plan of where we're going, but to put an ambulance online is probably a little over $500,000. I think the personnel costs to put a paramedic ambulance in McCammon would probably be about $660,000. I think it's right around $110,000 a person with all the wages and benefits and everything. So I think we need to consider whether peak staffing, we're able to trend, and I brought some numbers to show you guys, kind of just a visual representation of what's going on with call volume in South County. During time of day, it definitely ramps up a little bit later in the week, and you can really kind of predict. On the weekends, it stretches a little bit later into the evening and then continues throughout the night into the next morning. But really, you could consider whether a peak staffed unit, some agencies do that as kind of a bridge, either as a unit in itself or as a bridge until they can afford to put an ambulance online. But you may consider doing something, Wednesday through Saturday from noon to 10 p.m. or something like that, and we could trend those times and try to put something there just to get the highest likelihood that it's going to be able to field some calls. Certainly, you would miss some of those outliers that happen on Monday morning at 9 a.m. that you maybe didn't try to pick. And I actually have the numbers to go with those graphs. I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a visual representation, but so that's an option. So I think we just have to remember that we're not committed to just doing an ambulance or just doing paramedics or just doing one thing, that we can talk about what the right thing to do is, right, given the budgets and the personnel needs and the call volumes in the different areas.
And I would like to follow up on that. That's the thing that I've been impressed with this last year as I've had the discussions with the different groups, is everybody's really concerned about doing the right thing. Not, trying to fit somebody's agenda or something like that, but what's the right thing for the community. So I really want to commend all the parties involved. That's the attitude that has been prevalent throughout our discussions. And so, thank you for that. So, given the fact that if we were to do, again, just hypothetically, if we were to do a peak volume down south, would you take an actual ambulance out of Pocatello, park it down there over the weekend, for example, and then bring it back? Or would we use more like a quick response vehicle to do something like that?
Well, I think all options are on the table. 12 years ago, when we added an ambulance, we did, we used to run 2 frontline ambulances in the kind of the metropolitan area. We added an ambulance at our fire station 2. We did the analysis then, and we brought it online. But as we were transitioning into that, there was a period of time that we staffed that ambulance during what we determined were those peak hours, and we did it using overtime, just to kind of see what it did. And then at some point, so I guess you could decide to staff something like that using overtime. You could hire and schedule that. You could try to rotate a unit down there. One of the issues with that is that the peak demand service-wide kind of generally follows what we're seeing as peak demand there. And so during those times when you'd be rotating a unit down there, would be also the times that you're busiest in your high call volume areas. And so then you would deal with either them driving back to field those calls, or you deal with that call overlap situation. So I really think that the logical direction is probably to look at adding some sort of apparatus, whether it's a single paramedic unit in an SUV that backs up the volunteer ambulances down south, or whether we can talk about putting another ambulance on somewhere in the system that really takes some pressure off. But I think we're at the point probably right now where moving existing units around in the system per time of day is not probably going to solve the problem. We probably need to look at how to expand the system.
Okay, and I want to address something real quick, and Jordan and I talked about this the last time we met. We do have a privatized service now in Pocatello for transporting, and I wanted to, be upfront with the union that it's our job to be fiscally responsible and look at all potential options. And so I didn't invite them today because I wanted to have the discussion with the group that was already in place and is working well. But again, I just want to be very open and honest about that, depending on where things go, that is something that we do have to look at based on staffing ability, equipment, so on and so forth. So.
Well, when I was with the city of Ingham, we had a QRU unit, which the city paid for 100%.
Right.
And that's an option I think that is out there is we talk to the cities out there, and you put a QRU unit in those cities, and then staff an ambulance in McCammon. Because if we're only transporting 40%, the deal is get somebody there. And you can do that with a cheaper unit and a QRU unit, and then have a full-time unit in McCammon that could be the transport and not pull something out of Pocatello. Just something to throw out there, because, we operated for a lot of years, and the city of Ingham pulled people out and had a QRU unit instead of, yeah.
That's the same model you have in Chevy.
Right.
You don't fund anything other than this year. Ryan is finally, not finally,
You can say finally.
no, that's fine. We had an issue with non-matching APs, and so we have ADs, so we have to rip pads on patients. But
We signed a bill on that.
thank you. I think it's the best thing for the patient that we ever did. We were ripping pads off patients, put pads back on the medics right there.
Yeah.
But you literally have zero funding issue with Chevy. So,
Yeah. It's just something to throw out there.
Right.
I'd like to, like I say, I'd like something out there. You wouldn't be pulling an ambulance out of any of the other, Pocatello or something. If you pulled the one out of Ingham and put in McCammon,
Yeah.
and then put QRU units back in there. Something
Yeah,
to think about.
I don't know the history and whether the city of Downey or even the fire district down there or in Lava, whether they ever staffed QRUs. We had a master plan done in 2018 where one of the recommendations from the company was to engage with those fire districts down there to try to get them to do QRU response like Chubbuck and Pocatello Fire do. I worry about their bandwidth, their ability to fund it, and their ability to maintain a volunteer pool that can staff that. I think probably, and this is a little bit of a conjecture on my point, but I think probably the call volume in South years ago, I don't even, to be honest, know when we started running ambulances in South County.
It's been in Downey and been in McCammon, but it's been a volunteer basis, or not McCammon, Lava. But you look at Lava, that place is as big as Chubbuck is during the summer. I mean, and the personalities that are there, they need something. I mean, it becomes a mess.
Yeah.
Downey's lost a lot of what it had at that time. I mean, Downey had a hospital at that time and other things, and they've lost all that.
Yeah.
But
We are definitely seeing the highest call volume in South County is in Lava zone,
yeah,
which is that whole valley down there, so.
So as we talk about going forward a little bit, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing some of your ideas as we talk about where do we put something that can serve the North County / Chubbuck more effectively, in addition to Pocatello, what are some of the ideas that you guys have had that you thought we could maybe talk about today?
I think that maybe, and this is me kind of speaking off of the cuff a little bit, maybe we can look at reorganizing how we deploy our resources as far as who is on an ambulance, whether it's a medic and an EMT or 2 medics. And this is all, stuff that is going to have to be discussed with the labor group. And whether or not we can share that load a little bit more as a pool, which isn't typically how we've done it in the past. It's kind of been the medics are the one that take the brunt of the calls, and if we were able to kind of diversify that a little bit more within our EMS system to allow the basics to take more calls and encourage that and give them the level of training that they need in order to provide that service as well. And this is kind of just me throwing some ideas out there. That might be one way that we could spread ourselves out a little bit more. But again, it's going to be more taxing on the current labor group, just because we are seeing that increase in calls, and we're starting to get a little bit more of a spread throughout the county with the calls in general. So, and in the past 5 years, the calls have just kind of been trending up. There was a little bit of a dip in COVID. That's kind of when people didn't really want to go to the hospital. But for the most part, the call numbers are trending up, which puts more of a strain on the employees. You're out running calls, and then you come back and you have to spend an hour doing a report for a call. You have to restock the ambulance. You have to find some time in there to get some food to eat and take care of your training. So as we start to see that increase in calls, it wears on a guy a little bit. So the more we can kind of spread that out a little bit, and the more creative we could get with our structure, and I think that would help for a little while. But if the calls keep trending and the population keeps growing, we may have to look at some different options.
Merlin, talking about location out in that in the Chubbuck / North County area, is there an ideal spot to house something like this?
I approached both Chief Gates and Chief O'Hearn, but we're more than willing, if you got an ambulance, you put it in our station. We'll pay for the EMT, if you can augment it with the medic. That's always been on the table. And as we get closer to building our Station 2, the plan was to put a bay on it for that purpose. So,
What's your time frame on Station 2? Do you have a guess?
I'm hoping I'll find out in June.
Okay.
So, and then whatever process build time is from that point.
And what's your location on that? Do you have a?
Angela, the building in Angela.
Okay. Okay.
Initially, we were going up off New
Yeah.
but our growth is not coming to go that way, going more or less. So.
Okay. Okay. Mayor, do you have something?
Yeah,
You
you know
look
what,
like you had a thought.
I do, and I don't want to get us off track maybe we are on track, but as I understand it, we've committed to an ambulance in South County. I think as I look at these maps here, it shows that we might be able to staff an ambulance in there, or maybe we should be talking about staffing an ambulance and keeping one there during these peak hours. The question is, how do we get personnel from Pocatello there without reducing what we have here? And maybe we can't do that, but I think that if we get a thing in Chubbuck in the next couple of years with the new fire station, that's when we need to start having that discussion on how we're gonna man that. And I think part of the discussion maybe today is a good one to say, oh, how do we serve Chubbuck more right now? But as I understand it, we're focused in South County with an ambulance now. My biggest concern is, and question is when are we going to have a place for that ambulance to land, and when do we need the personnel there? And then we're not supposed to talk about funding, so I won't bring how we're paying for those employees up today. But I think the question of when and how are two major ones in my mind. I guess that if I'm stacking priorities for a meeting like this, we're going to South County, we already know that. I think we need to figure out how we're going to South County and what resources we have to put there. And then the second tier would be, okay, Chubbuck is growing, we're gonna need something else in Chubbuck eventually, maybe in 8 months, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, but we need a place for it, and we don't know where that place might be in for another, well, hopefully June, you said, right?
Hopefully June.
And so I think my focus right now would be, what are we doing in South County? How do we do that? And Pocatello, I think, is committed to making sure we have personnel there. It's just 6 personnel or a lot of money.
And that's the whole point of this discussion today is, okay, if the goal is to go full-time in South County, which I think we all recognize today is not the day we do that.
Yeah.
You know, is that 5 years from now? Is it 3 years from now? But also serve that north end, the Chubbuck, and so your priorities are spot on.
So my question, I guess, then is we're here to help the commission fulfill the promise or the things that you've told your constituents there in South County, that we're going to put an ambulance in South County. When you said that, I did not hear maybe in 5 years. I heard we're putting our next resources in South County. And maybe I'm wrong, but if we're going to help you fulfill that promise, then quite frankly, that's where we should be focused on. How are we going to do that? And I'm assuming we're going to push that forward within the next 12 months.
The ambulance bay will begin being built sometime this year.
How long does it take to get an ambulance? Is it like a fire truck? Because if
I
it
think
is, we've
we'd
got
be able-
6 years.
Yeah. It's not as long, and I think that we would be able to put, if all the stars aligned and the station was ready in December and we decided we wanted to staff it, I think we would have an ambulance to put there. Maybe not a new one, but a reserve one to rotate down there, and then maybe get one on order. You know, our plan right now is to put in for an Idaho EMS grant this spring, depending on what we decide to do in South County. And we feel like with a grant narrative of saying we're expanding EMS services into rural Bannock County, we feel like that's a very strong grant application. And so whether it's an ambulance or an SUV or something, we feel like we're going to get moving on the capital portion of that.
And right now, EMS is a big discussion point at the state. I think the legislature is passing a resolution that it will become a priority over the course of the next year or something to that effect. And so, again, Mayor, we're not trying to make a decision today. The main part was I've been having conversations with the union. I've been having conversations with Chief O'Hearn to bring everybody to the table, get everybody up to speed with the discussions that have been taking place, plant the seed so when we come back next time, we have a more thought-out discussion than today.
I think that's wise. I think we all have to have the same message moving forward, whether it's South County or Chubbuck or Pocatello. And I think that's an important thing. But I want to push yet again if we're gonna put an ambulance in South County in December, we have to hire 6 employees in October because we won't have the funding before fiscal year starts for those 6. And then I think the question is 6 the right number? Or do we just look at peak times and try to mesh things in? I mean, I've had some discussion with the union on this. I think the union has a big say in this with the fire as well and the chief. I mean, both of them have had thoughts on what to do and how to do it, but it always seems to come down to we need 6 more employees. And so as we start building the budget in the next month or two, the city probably needs to know where we are and what we're going to be looking at. I've already looked at new employee requests. Fire and EMS don't have any put in because I don't think we know if we're moving forward in this next fiscal year or not. And so, not that we're looking for an answer today, but I think within, the next 2 months, we kind of need to have some direction on how we're going to help you and all of us have that same message as we go throughout speaking, and you guys speak at different events that you're at, and I think that's going to be an important piece of this puzzle, so people know that we're actually moving forward with it.
Well, you know how the system works.
Absolutely.
We got to have this meeting before the 3 of us can participate in a conversation like this.
No question.
And so this is the first one that we've been brought up to date. And so I think it's a good informational meeting.
So I think going off of that, then that leads us to kind of the assignment, since we're getting close to our time frame now. I think with your comment, Mayor, that gives us kind of a deadline to come up with a push towards some kind of a solution, and a timetable for a plan to begin talking about and using for budget, staffing, bringing the communities together again and go.
And John's going down this afternoon to McCammon, is that correct?
Not today.
Oh, okay. But
But
the MOU,
You
he's
told him about all the snow down there. He's not crazy enough to drive down there with that today.
he was down there to lava a week ago.
That's right.
So,
But anyway, we're working on the MOU with McCammon right now. So we're in the middle of it.
so I don't want to, I know we're not supposed to talk finances, and so I'm not going to, but I think part of, within the next couple months, this group is going to have a feel for if the commission is willing to look at increasing that levy, if you at all can, to help fund this and the personnel on it. I think the city of Pocatello and Chubbuck probably need to have a discussion on how, if we can't get 6 new employees, how do we help you fund this or staff this, and then go from there. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking at anyway.
And just, again, to bring you up to speed with some of the discussions that I've been having as far as consolidating districts, if we're able to do that, part of the look is to include a portion in there for ambulance to help fund that. But that process, that'll be like a year-long process, so it won't solve anything for the upcoming time frame. But that's at least a 1-year process to do that. And so the last thing as we kind of ponder assignments and moving forward is talk about deployment. And I had some good conversations with the union about how they appreciate the opportunity to go on those deployments and do that. But then my next question, my follow-up to that is, what kind of a resource drain does that put on the system as a whole? And what kind of impact does that have on us? Okay, if we start moving towards McCammon without adding bodies as a potential, does that cut back on the deployment opportunities? So if we could talk about that for just a second, whether, Jordan, you want to start that discussion, or Chief?
I'll let Ryan talk to the impact it has on our.
Well, I'm not certain I understand the question as far as if we don't add bodies, are we still going to have the personnel to be able to do deployments and potentially staff McCammon? And I think the answer to that is yes, because of the agreements that we enter into. The agency, the EMS district and the fire department are made whole by the incident for their staffing levels. And so we're able to hire back off-duty personnel to maintain our staffing levels while our people are gone. And so the personnel costs are covered at 100%. And then either the city or the district also receives some income from the incident for, I'll call it the rental of that apparatus, whether it be an ambulance or a medical pack or a fire truck. And so the district or the city would then make a little bit of money as well to help accomplish capital projects, replacement programs, upgrades, things like that.
I guess that was part of my question, is if you are sometimes using equipment, and let's just say a ambulance unit itself to go on a deployment, that would then take away from the potential of using that in McCammon or down south. And so that's my question, is if we take a unit and put it down there, does that hinder the deployment?
It could potentially reduce some of the, excuse me, reserve capacity in the district by allocating a unit to South County and then sending another unit out of district. So if that's something that we wanted to engage in, which I'm definitely supportive of, and I think that the way we're seeing wildfire in the west, these incidents are getting larger and they're calling for more resources. I think that's an opportunity for us to do something different. And then I know we're running short on time, but some of the other funding opportunities in the coming years, in addition to the deployments, are the ground emergency medical transport legislation that passed last year. And the state is getting ready to submit their plan to CMS. And that should be a significant revenue source for the district and the cities, all that participate in EMS response in the future. So I hope to have more information about that program in the coming months.
Okay. Jordan, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback onto the wildfire deployment model, there have been quite a few deployments where we haven't even sent an ambulance out. Sometimes we're able to, the fire or the incident will call for medical personnel. Sometimes we're able to go rent them a vehicle and send that personnel to the fire. All of the expenses are still covered, and they're still paying the rental for that medic or for that EMT. So in a lot of situations, we're still able to send those out and not necessarily send out an asset. Sometimes the incident will call for a single resource. Remind me what the position is, like an incident commander.
Oh, strike team.
Strike team leader as just a single resource. So all we have to do is get him to the incident, whether that's in a car that we rented or whatever, and he's still bringing in revenue or that reimbursement for the department, for the district too. So it's not all the time that we actually have to send out an actual vehicle that is from the district. So.
Okay.
And I might just add, I don't know. I think we can look at it to see if we can do this without hiring new employees. I don't know if we can. As I think back in the discussion, we have depleted all of our resources in both cities a number of times just within the city here, and that's with calling people in, that's using reserve ambulances and things like that. And so I think we need to look at that, but I wouldn't hang my hat on it that we can do that, because what does it take on an ambulance? 3 people? Two people on an ambulance, and to staff an ambulance full-time, it takes 6, 24/7. And so when I start looking at that, to find 6 people that are in the mix right now that on an already strained system is difficult at best.
Right.
I would think. But I would be committed to taking a look at it, seeing if there's a way to make that happen. I'm not going to suggest that, all right, the city will figure it out, so let's not look at doing this. I think at the end of the day, whatever taxing authority that is available, I think the county's going to have to look at that and do it. And not to get off topic, but our good friend Representative Andrus just introduced a bill that if you increase the levy rate it's got to go in front of the voters people today. He introduced that, and so.
And that's why I was talking, when we were talking about consolidating the districts, it does require a vote because we would establish a new levy rate.
I'm talking about any time before you
Correct.
start your fiscal year you have, and it's just timing, it's impossible. I don't think he understands how cities and counties do that. But there again, this just adds,
Another layer.
that would be cities, that would be ambulance districts, library districts, that would be any taxing entity out there. And so that may change the way this conversation moves forward and whether or not you can keep promises that you made about going to South County at this point.
Right.
And so,
Well, what I would propose at this point in time is that we re-adjourn this meeting in 30 days and come together with more concrete ideas to bat around and with a direction that we can at least narrow down to something and then be able to be ready for budget time because we're ready to start talking our budgets as well. So.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the three of us and Merlin, if you want to join our little meeting, I think we could definitely get together in 30 days and at least have a discussion of what that could look like moving forward.
Okay. Commissioner Moser?
I just wondered, Adam, anything?
I'm just here to support it.
Okay,
Anything
okay.
you guys need from emergency communications, we'll make it happen.
Do you have an extra couple $1 million we can have for an ambulance and 6 people in South County?
Radios. I'll get radios for your ambulances.
No,
Well, since Adam is here, I'll use my last 2 minutes. Some of the other discussions as part of this expansion down there that we're going to have to take into consideration is how we alert that station, how we alert whatever unit is there. And so we are going to have to engage in a discussion about that station alerting process and kind of that system-wide approach to dispatching and alerting. So it is definitely a component. I appreciate Adam's presence. So.
Yeah. Commissioner Crowder?
No.
Anybody else? Mayor, you have anything else you want to end with?
I've probably spoken more than I should have. So,
That's
You
always
nailed
fun,
it
though.
today. It's perfect. Chief, anything?
No, I'm gonna.
Jordan?
Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Merlin?
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll get a date out on the calendar and come back. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.